Hey everyone, and welcome to my September reading wrap-up. September has been a bit of a weird reading month for me. I feel like in the first bit of the month I did a ton of reading, and the second half of the month I've done hardly anything because university has just started back. It's been Freshers Week and I've just been really busy. So at the start of the month I took part in the first month of the Read a Theme Readathon. If you want any information on the Read a Theme Readathon, I will leave it linked down below. And I picked up 3 books over the course of that weekend, the first of which is a poetry collection called Imagined Suns by Carrie Etter. This is a collection that is made up of both kind of verse poetry and prose poetry, and it is about a woman who gave her child up and now sees him everywhere. Whenever she sees a young man, she imagines that he could be her son. I really struggle with reading prose poetry and kind of working out the pacing for it and stuff, but I found this collection really strong. I really enjoyed it. I found the imagery was really powerful. I would highly recommend it if you enjoy poetry. The next book I picked up was Life on the Refrigerator Door by Alice Coopers. This is a book that I read when I was about 12 years old, and it did survive the massive cull of books that I did when I was about like 14 or 15. Really regret that massive cull. This is a book that is told entirely through notes that are left on a refrigerator door. It is about a teenage girl named Claire who finds out that her mother is suffering from cancer. It is a very touching book, and it shows how difficult it is to cope with kind of everyday life and the everyday life of being a teenager when you've got a parent that is suffering from something like cancer. And it shows how difficult it is for both the child and the parent, and how both of those people make mistakes. I thought I wasn't going to find this book as powerful the second time round because I knew the ending, but I forgot how quickly and suddenly the ending came, and it was still a very powerful book, and I would highly recommend it, particularly to those where this might be a subject that hits home slightly and it might be something you could relate to. And I also picked up The Little Prince. This book didn't leave as big of an impact on me as it did on other people, I don't think. I'm still yet to watch the Netflix adaptation of it. I might do that tonight, actually. But it didn't leave as massive of an impact on me as I expected. I feel like maybe it was bigged up too much for me. Like, everyone was telling me I was gonna cry, and I didn't. The same thing happened a few years ago with The Fault in Our Stars. People were saying, oh, you're gonna cry, and I just didn't. But if you don't know, The Little Prince is about this little boy, this little prince, that comes to visit this man, and the little prince tells the man all about his life and where he's from and what he does and all the other places that he has visited. It's very cute, it is very charming, and it is sad, and the illustrations are very nice. It just didn't leave as big of an impact on me as I expected it to. Next, I read Aileen by Otessa Moshfegh, and I buddy read this with Vanessa from Chbosky, who I link down below. And I had very mixed feelings on this book. I think Vanessa had some mixed feelings on it as well. This is about a woman named Aileen who works in a boys' prison, and she also has to look after her alcoholic father. Aileen has very odd and obsessive tendencies. She's obsessed with one of the prison guards, Randy. She goes shoplifting on the weekends to get a bit of a kick. A very vile, disgusting human being. She has very strange hygiene standards. They're very low hygiene standards. And when a new counsellor arrives at the prison, who I think is called Rebecca, I'm not sure, I don't quite remember, but I think it's Rebecca, comes to the prison, Aileen then becomes obsessed with her. One of my main problems with this book is how much telling there is as opposed to showing. The story is told retrospectively by an older Aileen, and I guess that kind of explains why it's so much telling, but it just meant getting into the scene and into the story was very difficult. There was this kind of barrier. I didn't find myself particularly interested in any of the characters. You know, Aileen was interesting for the first while, but then the novelty of her disgustingness wore off. Next, I read a short story collection that I absolutely loved, and it is called Multitudes, and it is by Lucy Caldwell. I loved this short story collection. Most of the short stories are based in Northern Ireland. They're based around Belfast. There are a few that are set in London as well, but it does feel like very Northern Irish. This explores the pain and heartache of growing up and some of the very difficult situations that we face while growing up. They are stories of longing and belonging, and I thoroughly loved this. I had to return my copy to the library, and I should have noted down the 2 stories that I particularly loved, but I think it was the second story where a girl goes drinking for, I think it's possibly the first time, and she gets really drunk and she ends up in a situation that she doesn't really want to be in. It's one of those stories where you end up putting the situation in your hometown because it's like, it seems so familiar, the circumstances, the community, it seems so familiar. And that's what I had with that story. And there was another one about a teacher and what happens when the students become quite obsessed with that teacher. Those are the two stories that really stuck out for me. I would highly recommend this short story collection. I thought it was fantastic. The writing was brilliant. The imagery was fantastic. The characters were interesting. It was really, really good. Next up, I read As I Descended by Robin Talley, and this was another book that I had mixed feelings on. This is basically an FF Macbeth retelling. So rather than having Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, we have two female characters, and it is set in a very kind of posh private school. I really appreciated the effort that Robin Talley made to make this book diverse. We have Maria and Lily, who are Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, one of whom is Hispanic, one of whom is disabled. And there are many supporting characters who identify as part of the LGBT plus spectrum, including a bisexual character, which is great. So there's been a real effort for this book to be diverse. The only criticism I would give on that front, and this is something I found with Robin Talley's novel What We Left Behind as well, was that such a strong effort has been being made to make the book diverse that when something's not quite right, it's glaringly obvious. I feel like they're trying to juggle so many balls that when they drop one, you really, really notice. Another problem that I had with this was the fact that I am very, very familiar with Macbeth. So basically, I knew what was going to happen. There was nothing that was really that surprising in the plot whatsoever, which is understandable when it is an adaptation. So basically for that reason I found it a little bit boring, and the characters kind of pale in comparison to their original counterparts. I wonder if I would feel differently about it if I didn't know Macbeth. I really kind of wish this wasn't a novel. I kind of wish it was like a Netflix original series or a film. Like, I really enjoy Shakespeare adaptations. I've written a Shakespeare adaptation, and it is a really useful tool to put them in a high school, and it's really interesting. But for me, I just felt that it was slightly too boring. This month I also read Ali Smith's Public Library, and this is another short story collection. Ali Smith is a very well loved and respected author. I believe she was in my authors to complete video, which I will link down below. Public Library is a collection of short stories based around libraries, around a love of reading, around the love of words. And in between each story there is an opinion piece, some from Ali Smith herself and some from other authors, like Jackie Kay's in there. And I almost felt like I enjoyed those bits more than the actual short stories. If you love books, if you love libraries, if you love reading, then I would really recommend this collection to you. Obviously libraries are going through a pretty tough time at the minute, and we all need to support them. So what better way to do that than pop along to your local library and see if you can find a copy of this short story collection. Then came the Diversathon and the Slowathon, and I read 6 books during those readathons. I'm not going to go through them now because I do have a full wrap up for those readathons, and I will link that down below. But I read The Tidal Zone by Sarah Moss, Wait by Jeanette Winterson, Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth by Wharton Shire, Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo, and Just Juliet by Charlotte Reagan. And the final book that I completed in September was Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding, because it's just a rite of passage, isn't it? So if you don't know already, Bridget Jones' Diary is about a 30-something-year-old woman named Bridget Jones who is single, and it's basically just, it is her diary, it is her life, it is what she gets up to, it is her counting her calories and counting how many cigarettes she has a day and how many alcohol units she has, and telling us all about her life and her new jobs and all the men in her life. Bridget is so likeable. I really love Bridget, and I did find myself relating to Bridget quite a bit. I just really loved sitting down with this book and a cup of tea and a pouch of chocolate buttons and just feeling like I was sat with a mate for an hour. It was really nice. It's so brilliantly self-aware and really, really funny. I really enjoyed it. It was just such a nice comfort book. I feel like it's just a rite of passage. As a young woman, you've got to pick up Bridget Jones at some point. My housemate just made me some tea. What an absolute bae. In September, I also read Lucien Lynn by Alice Pung, and this was a very interesting book. It wasn't the best book that I've ever read, but I did learn a lot from it. This is a young adult book, and it follows a teenage girl named Lucy. She is a Chinese Vietnamese refugee, and she went to a Catholic school but has since won a scholarship to go to a very prestigious school. Lucy never quite manages to fit in, and she struggles in the sort of social hierarchy of the school. This book is also told through a series of letters to her friend Lynn, who is very mysterious. Nobody really knows who Lynn is. This book deals with a number of social issues like racial prejudice and class prejudice, and I've never read a book that was set in Australia before. I'm pretty sure I haven't, which is shocking. And it deals a lot with the class divides there, and also what it is like to be a young Asian woman in Australia. The odd, ridiculous, ludicrous stereotyping that those young women can face. However, what let this book down for me was purely the writing. I'm not sure if it was because it is for a slightly younger target audience than me, but I found the kind of Mean Girls elements of the story to just be very stereotypical and not done well. There's a twist at the end of the book, which, while it did give me that, oh my god, why didn't I see that moment, in hindsight, I don't think it was crafted all that well, and I'm not really sure why it existed. Like, I get the point that the author was trying to make with it, but I feel like that point could have been made in a better, stronger way. So while I don't think this was the best book that I've ever read, and I wouldn't be in a rush to recommend it to someone, I do think it was a really good starting point for me to read more Australian writing and read more Asian Australian writing. So yeah, overall a positive experience. These are all the books that I finished in September. I am currently halfway through 3 books, the first of which is Holding Up the Universe by Jennifer Niven. I was like a quarter of the way through that last month. I'm getting there. I do want to finish it over the next few days. And also I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai. I'm like halfway through this one, and The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot. I am a little under halfway through this one. So you will see these two in my October wrap-up. Oh my god, the year is going so quickly. What is going on? Do let me know if you read any of the books that I have read this month. If you have any thoughts on them, let me know down in the comments. I would love to have a little chat, and I will see you guys in a few days.